Anthropic just turned Claude into a coworker. Not another chatbot, not another AI app. An actual teammate that lives inside Slack, remembers conversations, works on tasks for hours, and can even remind people about things they've forgotten. And this might actually be one of the clearest glimpses we've had of what AI employees could actually look like. So let's talk about it all. Alright, so Anthropic just released something called Claude Tag for Claude, and it is basically Anthropic's completely new way for teams to work with Claude. So instead of opening another app or starting another chat, you simply add Claude to your Slack workspace. Now, if you've never worked at a tech company, you're probably wondering what Slack even is. So think of it as Discord, but for companies and workplaces. It is where teams chat, share files, discuss projects, report bugs, and collaborate on pretty much everything they do. Anthropic has basically put Claude right in the middle of all of that. So instead of opening another Claude window, you can simply tag Claude inside a channel just like you would tag a coworker and ask it to do something. And the working of Claude Tag is pretty simple. It breaks the task into stages, works through them with the tools it has access to, and responds in the thread with what it creates. And then it gets to work. It can analyze data, read your codebase, investigate bugs, work with GitHub, connect to Jira, look through databases, and even work across multiple tools at the same time before posting the results back into the Slack thread. In other words, this isn't really a chatbot anymore. It's starting to look a lot more like a digital employee, and according to Anthropic, they're already using it heavily inside their own company. In fact, the company says around 65% of its product team's code is now being created with the help of their internal version of Claude Tag. 65%. That is a ridiculous number. 5 years ago, if you had told software engineers that most of a major AI company's code would eventually involve AI, they probably would have laughed at you. But today, that's just normal at Anthropic. And it goes far beyond coding. The company says they're using Claude to investigate product metrics, handle support tickets, track down bugs, and automate all kinds of work that normally takes hours of human time. But here's the really clever part. Claude Tag isn't designed for one person, it's designed for entire teams. Anthropic describes it as multiplayer. Inside a Slack channel, there's one Claude that everyone can interact with, everyone can see what it's working on, everyone can continue the conversation from where someone else left off. And that might sound like a small feature, but it's actually a pretty big deal, because right now, most AI work is invisible. You ask ChatGPT something, nobody else sees it, the context disappears, and then somebody else has to start from scratch again. That's where Claude Tag changes everything. The entire conversation happens in public, the context stays there, and the AI slowly becomes part of the team's shared knowledge. Think about it like this. Right now, AI feels like having a private assistant. Claude Tag feels more like hiring another employee. An employee that works 24 hours a day, never takes vacation, and somehow responds to Slack messages faster than every human on Earth, which honestly might be the most unrealistic thing about this entire product. But here's where things get even more interesting, because Claude doesn't just sit there waiting for instructions. It can actually take initiative. Anthropic calls this ambient mode. If it's enabled, Claude can proactively tell you about things it thinks are important. Maybe a discussion has stalled, maybe a bug still hasn't been fixed, maybe a task has gone unresolved. Claude can simply jump into the conversation and remind everyone about it. So honestly, at this point, we're getting dangerously close to giving AI project manager abilities. Somewhere right now, a middle manager just opened ChatGPT and started asking career questions. And that's what makes Claude Tag feel different. This isn't another chatbot with a few extra features. This is one of the first serious attempts to turn AI into an actual teammate. And that's not all. Anthropic says Claude also works asynchronously, meaning that you can give it a task, close Slack, go to lunch, go to sleep, or work on something completely different, and Claude just keeps going in the background. Anthropic claims it can even schedule tasks for itself and work on projects over hours or even days. That's a pretty big shift. Because until now, AI has mostly been something you sit down and actively use. Claude Tag is different. You delegate something to it, and then forget about it until it comes back with the answer. It's actually much closer to assigning work to a person than chatting with a chatbot. And apparently, Anthropic itself is already working this way. The company says employees now spend much more time delegating work to many clouds in parallel. Just think about that for a second. Anthropic employees aren't just working with one AI anymore. They're apparently managing teams of AIs. We really are living in strange times. But that also raises an obvious question. How do you stop this thing from seeing everything? Because no company is going to let an AI loose inside their Slack channels if it can access sensitive information that it shouldn't. Anthropic's answer is something called Claude identities. Think of them as separate versions of Claude for different teams. The engineering team's Claude has access to engineering tools and data. The The sales team's Claude has access to sales information and data, and the two don't share memories or information with each other. Admins can control exactly what Claude can see, what tools it can use, and even how much money each channel is allowed to spend. There's also an audit log showing everything Claude did and who asked it to do it. In other words, Anthropic is trying to make this feel less like a chatbot and more like actual company infrastructure. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from this entire launch. Because the real competition here isn't another chatbot war. It's the battle to make AI more and more useful for your company. Microsoft wants it with Copilot, Google wants it with Workspace. So whether this becomes the future of work or just another Claude experiment, it remains to be seen. But one thing is becoming very clear. The next generation of AI probably won't live in a chat window. It'll live inside the tools we already use every day. That's it for this video. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of what's happening in AI, and I'll see you guys in the next one.